and welcome to the first session for the Competitive Enablement Summit. I'm Adam McQueen. I'm the content lead over at Klue, and I'm going to be moderating this session today. We've got a couple minutes before, but I just want to make sure everything's working on the tech end here. How many people? We got people trickling in as we come. We've got a few minutes until 10 a.m. when we'll bring Clara on, do the formal introductions. But in the meantime, let's kind of get the chat going a little bit, get people kind of acclimated to the Hopin platform here. If you go to the speaker section on the right-hand side, you'll see everything you need for this session. We've got the event chat, the polls, the people, the Q&A. If you would go into that event chat, let me know where you're coming in from to start with here. What you thought of Stefan's session. I know I took a bunch of notes on that one, and what you're hoping to get out of this session as well. And if anyone hasn't gone in the meet and greet yet, do so. Don't do it now, though. You gotta stay for the session, after the session, because it's really fun. One-on-one connection on there. You get to chat with people, share your info with them after, so you can connect after the fact. Actually, funnily enough, I went into the meet and greet session, and I don't know if it's serendipity, but I got paired up with Clara. So I think that was because she knew that I might not be prepared, and she had to give me a final pep talk to get me ready to go. Chris, it's good to see you in the chat too. You've had 5 one-on-one sessions already? You're a social butterfly. All right. So, but yeah, before Clara gets on here, and again, people are going to start trickling in, but I wanted to just walk through everyone, like how this platform is going to work and how the session will work and all of that good stuff. So for those of you that are just joining, I'm Adam McQueen, the content lead over at Klue. I'll be moderating this session. I've had the privilege to get to know our speaker, Clara Smyth, over the last few months, and I know we're in for a treat for this session. I've had a chance to look through it, and I've got a chance to pick Clara's brain a bunch on this topic in particular, and it's going to be awesome. So before Clara joins us, the housekeeping items that I would like to run through are on the right-hand side. You're going to see Summit, My Agenda, and Speaker Session. Let's move all over to the speaker session. That's where all the good stuff's happening. You'll see that there's the event chat. So again, drop a note where you're coming in from. One word to describe how your day's been so far. That's where we'll be just going back and forth during the session. There'll also be a couple of polls, as you can see as well. And then the people who are attending, and then the Q&A box. So feel free throughout the event, throughout the session, to be putting in your questions, and we'll get to those for the final 20 or so after Clara's done her presentation. Again, Clara's going to be big on engagement. Like I said, there's going to be polls, questions, so just keep firing them through. And also, you can hop on video with us. We'd love to see you in person. And so when you ask your question and you feel comfortable going on video during the Q&A session, just drop a note and let me know. You can ask to share your video and audio, and I can bring you up on stage during the Q&A session. Other than that, let's just enjoy this. We've got Clara coming up very soon. Where are you, Clara? Okay, I see. You're in the waiting room now. We also, boom. So, 10 o'clock, boom. Let's get this thing going. So, Clara, I'm bringing you on stage, what you've all been waiting for. Clara.
Hi,
Welcome.
Adam. Can you hear and see me?
You're on screen. You
Wonderful.
are in good looks HD, great audio as well, might I add.
Well, welcome, everybody. So excited to have you in our session today.
This is gonna be awesome. I'm very excited. So to formally introduce Clara as well, Clara is an experienced enterprise marketer, self-proclaimed competitive intelligence nerd, and market analyst. Clara spent over 10 years of insights leading SaaS companies like Oracle, NetSuite, ADP, iSIMS, and Slack in her daily practice. So, as a senior product marketer focused on competitive intelligence at Slack, Clara partners with sales, executive, and product management and leads their win-loss program. Clara is passionate about putting competitive intelligence into action and has supported the closing of $25 million in competitive revenue throughout her career. She's also a triathlete, an avid public speaker, and always open to listening and learning from others. Also, a fun fact, or not so fun fact, I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, Clara. Despite being born in New Jersey, she has not watched a single episode of The Sopranos, which, like, I know we get along, I know we're friends, but I judge you a little bit for that. So
I don't have a Jersey accent either. I'm an anomaly.
anyways, I'm excited to have you here today. I'm excited for everyone in attendance. I'm gonna hop off screen and I'm gonna let you take this thing away.
Thank you so much, Adam, and welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to be here to share a little bit more about feeding the lions. So let me go ahead and share my screen. If we could just get a couple people in chat saying that they see my screen, that would be fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and press present. See the screen. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Arter and Nikki. Appreciate it. Wonderful. Well, hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I am pumped to be part of the first ever Competitive Enablement Summit. Big shout out to Klue for making this happen and for tapping me as a lead speaker. So today we're here to talk a little bit more about feeding the lions, secrets to providing competitive content that actually gets consumed. But before we jump in, I want to share a little bit about myself, my passions, and my orientation around why I'm sharing competitive intelligence today. A little bit about me, like Adam said, I come from a couple of SaaS companies that you might know of, ADP, Oracle, iSIMS in the HR tech space. And most importantly, and what I'm most passionate about is actually sharing best practices out on the speaker circuit. I've spoken at Skip, G2 Reconverge, their intelligence symposium, the first ever competitive marketing summit that happened in Denver, Colorado, where I'm based. So most importantly, I'm really excited to pay it forward to the industry so that nobody has to make the mistakes that I made, and that I can make sure to continue the legacy and the investment that so many people have made in me. So that's a little bit about me, why I'm here today, and I'm so excited to continue our session today, and most importantly, hear from you. So what are we going to be talking about today? Our first point in the agenda is we're going to be talking about preparing the meal. One thing you'll learn about me is I'm very, very corny and sarcastic. So as you see in the agenda, we're going to be preparing the meal today in terms of feeding the lions. We're going to talk about sticking your hand in the lion cage and what that looks like in terms of enabling and delivering content. We're then going to talk about the meat and potatoes, right? The real crux of delivering content and what that looks like. And I'm really excited to share some fantastic live competitive examples that I've seen in the industry, well beyond what I've seen at Slack. And then additionally, the takeout bag, and close it out with Q&A. But most importantly, I want to make sure that you know that this is your presentation. This is not the Clara show. This is not the Adam McQueen or the Klue show. This is your presentation. And so everything you see and put in chat, I'm going to be reading in real time. So I would love to adjust and speak a little bit more to my experiences and share more stories based on what you put in chat. So if you are multitasking or looking to take a nap during the session, don't do that. This is going to be the exact opposite. And I'm hoping to make it the best presentation that you're going to receive today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start out by a quick pulse check. Adam is going to spin up a poll. So if everybody could look in their chat section of the window. And the question is, how confident are you that sales, or really anybody in your company, uses your competitive content? So there's a rating scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. I want to see where everybody stands so that I can appropriately adjust the presentation. Got some people putting in. Yeah, if you click into the poll section, that tab there, you can answer or you can put it in chat, whatever works. All right, I see the live results coming in. Seems like the majority of people, over 40 votes, are around level 3, right? So halfway there. They're 50-50 confident. We see about 20% around 4, just 3 votes up at 5, and then the majority around 1, 2, and 3. So it seems like we have a lot of learners here today. I'm so excited that you're here, and I'm really hoping that you'll be able to pull some deep insights so that your confidence level can go up in terms of delivering that content. And for all those in 4s and 5s, would love to hear your best practices in chat, right? Keep us honest, as I always say. Would love to learn from you as well. So now that we know where everybody's at in terms of our pulse check, we're going to go ahead and jump into a little bit more about preparing the meal, excuse me. And are you cooking up what they want to eat? So I want to start off the conversation, and this is really like Enablement 101. I'm going to put on my enablement hat real quick and share some preparations must-haves before feeding the lions. So very similar to what our previous speakers spoke about today about recent and accurate content. This is a huge pulse check that I absolutely should encourage everybody to take and look in the mirror, right? Is my intel accurate? Does sales trust my content? And who can I highlight and recognize in the creation of content? So as content creators, we tend to maybe publish under our own name, right? Or publish anonymously, or maybe put it in a portal. But it's so important to actually give shout outs and highlights to the people that submitted the content, who submitted the intel, and who were so critical in creating that intel. So of course, I'm from Slack. I'm going to be promoting Slack. In Slack, you can easily tag people. And so on my posts, when I post new articles and newsletters and updates, I make sure to tag the right people so that they can put their face emoji on there and feel really good about contributing to the Compete program. So another area to consider before feeding the lions is the delivery mechanism, right? Have you thought about, does it live where sales lives, right? Most companies out there have CRM systems, and this is a fantastic place to actually place your content within. I'm not here to tell you which tool to use or which CMS to use, content management system, but really think about how can you scale it to make it effortless for sales and for anybody to get access to your content and presentation. And then also ask yourself the questions like, how easily updated is it? How accessible is it for the entire company? I was working at one company and they had a certain portal for competitive intelligence, but it was only accessible to sales. And that's really hurting the rest of the company from accessing that information, from validating it and using it. So don't be that company that, I can't name drop these companies, but don't be that company that only secluded it to sales, but try to open it up as much as possible. And then lastly, is there a feedback loop? Do they know who you are? And how do you give feedback at scale, right? All of these questions are absolutely worth asking and planning and talking with your enablement folks before delivering content. So just some must-haves that I would highly recommend that I've learned through blood, sweat, and tears throughout my career. So some cooking tips and tricks. When we're talking about content creation and delivery recommendations, I would say first and foremost, scope out your time and set expectations. Make sure that you're not delivering a 7-course meal if you only have food for a 1-course meal, right? Decide what you're going to be serving up to the field and communicate that clearly so that there's an expectation, time, and understanding between both of the parties there. I would highly recommend, if there's anything that you're going to remember from this presentation, this is my biggest takeaway, is find taste testers for early feedback. Create content testing and a pilot group. Just today, we have a certain channel in Slack where people can give their input and feedback in terms of what's going on in the market. Somebody asked for a specific piece of intel, and I flipped it on them. I said, hey, Matt, I would love to include you in the creation of this. Would you mind to be a beta tester? And he said, absolutely, right? So instead of just being a service arm, you're actually being a partnership arm. And that person or that rep or that product manager is equally involved from a co-ownership angle. And then lastly, drink your own champagne. So as a competitive intelligence analyst in a previous life and now focusing on competitive intelligence solely at Slack, this is something that I do time and time again. So if I'm going to create an objection handling guide or I'm going to create a battle card, I'm going to make sure that I'm using that in internal training and content and as appropriate in external engagements as well, so that I'm not just pushing content out into sales or out into the universe and saying, good luck, have fun with it. But I'm saying, no, I'm going to own this. I'm going to put this into practice. And most importantly, I'm going to make sure that people know that I trust the content that I create and that they can put it into action. Thank you, Jedediah. I'm so glad that you love the cooking metaphor. I thought it was maybe too corny, but keep going. It's only going to get better. So let's go ahead and move on. I want to tell you a quick story about an account executive that I was working with recently. His name was Jack. And of course, I put a Jack Russell on our slide today because I am a huge dog lover and have a rescue dog of my own in the background hanging out, not working, but living the life. And I wanted to tell you the story here about Jack. So Jack is an amazing account executive at one company that I worked with. And he is truly leading the way in terms of what it means to be a great competitive seller. And so my colleague, who is also doing competitive intelligence work, she decided to roll out this big narrative campaign, right, on how we're going up against a certain provider in the market. And Jack went through the training, he understood it, and when he went to apply it, he really struggled with that. And he felt like it wasn't aligned with how he could go to market and how he could win deals. And the learning point from the story is that Jack was never involved in the front end of the process, right? We never got Jack's buy-in at the beginning. And so we have him as a detractor on the back end. And that's the worst thing that can happen, is having your best sales reps not included in the early pilot testing of narrative, of content, of battle card, of whatever you're rolling out. So highly recommend you to make sure that you get Jack on your side, you get Jack Russell on your side, and most importantly, you're beginning to test early and often with your best promoters in the field and make sure that they don't become detractors. So that's a quick story that I wanted to leave with you. So let's move on to sticking your hand in the cage. How do you deliver content safely and securely? So I wanted to first kind of take a moment and look back into the Harvard Business Review and some of the major thought leaders out there and explain kind of what do top salespeople do, right? What do our top revenue generators in the company do? And I'm going to read this out to you. Sales is less about selling and more about leading, which requires high levels of confidence, which in turn requires knowledge and experience. This concept can be expressed mathematically as knowledge plus experience equals confidence to lead. So you can control the first part, which is the knowledge part, but the second one, which is the experience part, comes with time. And because we're at a competitive enablement summit today, we know that we are in the business of knowledge management, of knowledge delivery, and that the experience part comes with time. So specifically focusing in on that knowledge piece, I want to make sure to focus in on, where are you housing that knowledge? Make sure you have a portal, a dedicated site, a CMS software. Similarly to how Stefan and Jason spoke about this morning, there needs to be a one-stop shop, a one source of truth that people can go to. Otherwise, it's just completely disparate tribal knowledge all across the board that nobody can really trust or find confidence in. Lastly, around the how, putting it into action. This is something that I'm really, really passionate about, is lunch and learns, right? Having a couple of pieces of content that you want to share with the field, have everybody bring their lunches virtually, put themselves on camera, and show them your latest battle card, show them your latest external marketing materials from a competitive lens, and then ask them how they're going to use it, or put a couple case studies in action in terms of, I want to tap this rep and share how they use this content. And I want this story to be shared based on how this solution engineer put it into their demo, right? And so putting it into action is really, really critical in terms of making that content sticky and applicable. And then lastly, the why, right? We had a question earlier around measurement and improvement, right? You can absolutely do before and after confidence score surveys. So what I have done previously with the field is you do a survey on the front end of how confident are you in our assets, and then you roll out the new assets, and then you roll out the survey again, and you see the increase or even change in NPS score if that's an aspect that you want to focus in on. You can also look at certifications, right? Percentage completed and attendance, and then also content download and uptake numbers. So I think I put to bed a lot about content delivery, content enablement, some really critical best practices around that. And I would encourage you all, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. That's based on my experience. Happy to pay it forward at any point. So now let's jump into the meat and potatoes, the yum yum, as I like to call it, be really corny and sarcastic from New Jersey. So we're going to do another quick poll here. So everybody on the line, if you could click to the polls section, it's the second tab over, and answer this question. What kind of assets do you think sales wants? All right, just going to click into the poll here, see what Answers are coming in. So it looks like we have 31 votes for competitive battle cards. We have around 20 votes for external facing competitive content, 10 votes for a deal support or strategizer, almost 20 votes for win-loss insights. So it seems like our top two are competitive battle cards and external facing competitive content, which is not a surprise. So I'm so appreciative of everybody who made this data happen in real time. And I'm excited to kind of adjust my presentation to best serve the people who are putting their data into the poll. So your question to this is actually, it was a trick question, right? And Clive said it best. It depends on the opportunity. Matt said they all want battle cards for every possible situation. Garth kind of guessed it. Maybe it's all of the above. So Garth, I think you clearly saw my deck. The answer is whatever it takes to close the business. So it can be in the form of a battle card, can be in the form of an external facing competitive piece, a feature function matrix, an objection handling or discovery guide. Maybe they want to understand what is the inside scoop that their colleagues are doing and making the most with in the field in a competitive situation. So my 2 cents on this is the how will look different for every single deal. Yes, the battle card is the cornerstone of the CI deliverable, but at its core, it feeds into all these other deliverables that sales can actually run with and use and make actionable. And in my personal experience, not to go against the poll data, but in my personal experience, the number one ask that I get from sales reps are, what can I share with my prospect? What can I put in my EBR deck? What can I share in my external executive presentation coming up, right? Similarly to product, right? They want to understand what can we share in our roadmap with customers, right? How can we stack up to the latest competitor? And then lastly, this one is an underrated one, but what I've seen in terms of your CI engagement is that there's a curve, right? At the beginning, you're going to get a lot of activity of people using your battle cards and asking you for help and asking for deal strategy sessions and feature function matrices. And then when they learn the content, they're going to get really self-sufficient. They're not going to need you anymore. And when I say that, I say it in a kind of dismissive way, but what I really mean is that they want to learn from you based on market updates. And they also want to learn from you in terms of this FOMO inside scoop, right? The most tenured, deadly account executives are probably better at competitive selling than I am, but they'll always come back to me when they ask me, what are others doing to win the deal? So definitely think about that as you continue to think about whatever it takes to close the business in your content creation strategy in that regard. So I'm going to jump into some real life examples now. I know we have about 5 minutes left in the presentation, so I'm going to speed through this really quickly. But basically, I wanted to take a sample sales cycle here. Now, I know that you guys could probably rip this to shreds, that it's not perfect for your company or your industry, and maybe Clara took this right off of Google. If that's the case, no problem. But the main point here is that I wanted to showcase what are great examples of competitive content at every stage of the sales cycle. And most importantly, how can you put that competitive content into practice to move enablement forward? So in our first stage here under prospecting, I wanted to share some examples of killer competitive prospecting content. So listed some on the page here: competitive prospecting emails, benchmarking industry and peer content, competitive webinars, interactive checklists and one-pagers. All of these are assets that I've personally created for companies that have really moved the needle to bring more leads in on the front end of the funnel. And these are some examples, right? This is one webinar that we ran around why Microsoft users should choose Slack in relation to Microsoft Teams, right? And then additionally, what I've seen in the market is, in this case, Oracle has these one-pagers versus Infor versus Microsoft on their public page that anybody can download, of course, once you put your information into the landing page. But as you can see here, these are great top of the funnel differentiation pieces of content to help buyers get more educated from you and move themselves through the sales cycle. Moving forward from a qualifying and presenting situation and stage, I often have seen affirming third-party content work extraordinarily well. Maybe a logo slide around these customers left XYZ competitor and moved over to my company. I've also seen why my solution is better than the rest one-pager, and differentiated demos as well. So all of these are options that you can run with depending on your industry, depending on your bandwidth, depending on your scope, that I've seen work really, really well. Sarah asks, real time, how often should we be updating these assets? I would say it depends on how quickly your market changes, right? So depending on the updates from your competitors, obviously you want them reflected. But Sarah, I think at the end of the day, what I would say is that if you lead with your own value proposition and your own competitive differentiation, you don't have to change it that often, right? Because your take on the market and your competitive value proposition shouldn't be changing every day or every week, maybe every quarter or so. So that's my take. Thank you for the question, Sarah. I appreciate it. This is a great example of a previous company that I worked for. If you do some sleuthing, you can figure it out. But basically on their main website, they have a competitive case study library that you can search by vendor displaced. So in this case, I went there and I dropped down to, I want to see all of the companies that left Microsoft Dynamics GP or Great Plains and moved over to that vendor. And in this case, you can read for yourself all of the competitive examples of customers that have left and why they left that competitor specifically. And then in this case, you can see it up close, a screenshot from the actual case study where you had the system replaced was Epicor, and then they also considered Acumatica as a head-to-head solution. So you have two competitive stories, a rip and replace on one side and a head-to-head story, all coming from the customer, which is, in my perspective, the strongest source of truth there. This is also some third-party validating content where in this case, Oracle, kind of speaks to how Forbes and Computer World and analysts are rating Oracle very highly as a leader. What you'll notice here is there's no quadrant, there's no MarketScape, there's no up and to the right, but they make it happen, right, through other ways. And I got to give them credit for leading with the press coverage and obviously allowing analyst reports to be downloaded and for the information to be captured too. So moving on to handling objections, this is something that as you move throughout the sales cycle, your salespeople and your reps and your solution engineers and even people in product are going to be asking, how are we different than XYZ competitor? So I would highly recommend creating something like an internal facing objection handling guide, external facing competitive case studies like we talked about, and then feature function matrices. My big thing about feature function matrices is that you can easily create them and marketing can easily spin up a landing page with them on. But my biggest qualm with them is that they can be ripped to shreds by customers quite easily, and they can be ripped to shreds by your competitor who you're including. So my recommendation is don't be column B. Work with your prospect to create a custom feature function matrix to the criteria that they actually care about based on use case. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of what that looks like. So we'll take the Oracle example here. So this was screenshot right from their website. All of this is publicly available. All of this is Googling. I'm just going to make up a new word there, Googling available. But in this case, they had the business benefit and then why it matters. And then they had the competitor column or, specific to that competitor. So in that case, you're leading with your strengths, you're leading with your value, you're not bashing the competitor. And most importantly, you're aligning to the customer's business benefit. And then here you have the classic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 top reasons why you should go to, that competitor in relation. I'm just catching up on the comments. They're on fire. Here we go. Jay said, Googly, thank you. Love it. You want to sell value, not features. Angie said, how do you get customers to offer up that sort of information, especially in a public way? I would say definitely work with your customer marketing team appropriately and explain to them that we would love to highlight you in that regard. Some customers, of course, are going to say no, right? But also, if they're so excited about your system, they probably are equally excited to make sure that people who are on the previous system get as excited to move on to the next system. So a lot of customers, what I found, are quite open to it. They're quite excited about it, and they're not against it, depending on how you frame it, of course, in a respectful way. All right. So this actually came from somebody who's in chat. I got to give him credit. Alex McDonald, shout out to you here. He's a complete lead at Airtable. And he found this. I stole it from him. So sorry, Alex. I have to put you on the main stage here and give you credit. But basically, this is the DevOps tools landscape. And what it shows is not by feature function. It actually shows it by use case or value case in this regard. So you have manage, you have plan, you have create. These are the specific functions that customers come to and they say, I need this solution to help me verify. I need this solution to help me configure, right? It's their end goal. It's their business goal. It's not a specific feature function trap that you could fall into and just be like another X or check, in the boxes appropriately. And then lastly, in terms of competitive closing content here, there's something called a champion deck, which is something I'm very, very passionate about. And I wish I could show you all my champion decks, but that's probably not allowed by my employer. But basically, a champion deck is a deck that you put together so your prospect doesn't have to do the homework, right? They have a deck to sell that solution to the executives, to that next level of buyer. And additionally, competitive references to testify is a home run in terms of closing that deal. So think about what easy 1-2 page sliders or whatever you build could be champion content, what competitive references you could line up. Maybe they want to be anonymous. That's okay. Maybe they don't want to be on your website. That's okay. But if they could be involved anonymously in the sales cycle, that's a huge win too. And lastly, best bundled content package to date includes customer case studies, feature function, one-pagers. So in terms of closing content, that's everything under the sun, right? Or everything in the pot of soup there. All the ingredients can come together and look differently as you're closing up your deal here. And then nurturing content in close here, this is where your referral program can come in. This is where your competitive case studies can get started. And then also your win-loss interviews and playbooks back to the field. So just in close, in terms of our section here, you're probably thinking one critical thing, well, Clara, what about battle cards? You didn't speak once about battle cards. And my answer to you is yes, they are very important in terms of being a foundation piece of your CI program. But my question back to you is it actionable and is it shareable? And typically battle cards are internal only and they have fast facts and good positioning, but maybe that's not in an email draft, right? Maybe that's not in a killer deck against a competitor. Maybe that's not in an external facing marketing competitive landing page, right? So think about, yes, battle cards are important, but can we put them into practice from an actionable standpoint? And most importantly, how can we power people to make decisions off of this data? So the takeout bag, just want to close it out real quick and end with 3 core pieces of feedback for you. The first and foremost is listen to the field, right? Understand whatever stakeholder you're looking to serve, whether it's sales or product or executives, define your expectations and scope with them so that like I said at the beginning, you're serving up dessert or breakfast or lunch, whatever it is, they know what's coming down the pike and they can get really hungry and excited for it. My last one here is test early and often. Pick 1 to 2 deliverables to start with and test with your pilot group. And then my real last one is surprise and delight. Improve based on feedback and live application, what stage needs it the most, who's in most pain, and how you can prioritize accordingly, right? You want to make sure, as I shared earlier about the Jack story, that you want Jack to be a promoter of your program and somebody who's really excited about the content and has approved the content versus the detractor on the back end from not being included at the beginning. And then lastly, I would say, test 1 or 2 pieces of content. I know I walked through a whole laundry list of content that you can use, and that's probably seeming very overwhelming, but try 1 or 2 per stage, right? Test early and often, listen to the field, surprise and delight them, and you will become a critical person in your company, as well as a really sticky competitive intelligence and enablement function within your company. So now we're going to shift it over to Q&A. Adam, would love to welcome you back. And my last comment here is if you're maybe too shy, like this really cute monkey emoji here, you're more than welcome to find me on Slack Connect. This is a way where different Slack instances can talk to each other. You can just put my email in there and feel free to DM me a message. And then lastly, please feel free to find me on LinkedIn as well. So thank you, everybody, for your amazing engagement. And now we're going to transition to Q&A.
Clara, that was awesome. I think everyone on their screens are giving you a round of applause. So I'll give one too on behalf of everyone else here attending. And also, if you want to connect with Clara, just do what I did this morning and you'll get her if you're lucky enough, you'll get her on the one-on-one in the meet and greet section. But we've got about 10, 15 minutes or so for Q&A. I've had a couple come in before the session even started. We've got a couple in the Q&A section. So if people want to start dropping them in there. Also, if you're comfortable being on video, you want to hop on here and ask your question in person, just let us know. Drop a note in your question as well. And then I can get you on screen to ask the question. But to kick things off, there was a question actually before the presentation from Diane Chamberlain. And her question was simply, what content does your sales team go crazy for? Is there one in particular that you've noticed recently?
Yeah, Adam. And if anybody was paying attention, you remember my red boxes around that one slide. But basically, what they're dying to hear about are win-loss insights. They want to understand and make sure that the losses that happen to their friend or their colleague is not going to happen to them next time, right? So win-loss insights is always going to be top of mind. It's always going to be relevant, and will keep you going back and engaging them every week, every month, every quarter, every QBR.
I've got one actually from your good friend Alex, and Alex McDonald, who also just launched the Masters of CI course through the PMA, which is awesome. Highly recommend everyone check out as well. Clara's, I think you're featured on there too, Clara. Alex's question is regarding that feedback loop with sales. Do you have a way in which you can kind of capture and distribute the strong examples you see from customer calls and whatnot?
Yes, I do. So at Slack, we use a software piece called Gong. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but basically Gong records all of your sales external facing conversations. And then people like me are allowed to search through them, clip into them, create different snippets of them, share the snippets. And so when you talk about best practices, you can easily bundle up the best, say, competitive objection handling calls quite easily, right? And then, just shameless plug, Slack is just an incredible interface to share content throughout channels, cross-post them, and let people see, without any barriers, what's going on in the organization. And then Slack search too, you can search on a certain competitor and go across any public channel to find that intel. So it's truly a historical database when it comes to, current competitive intel, and then most importantly, sharing that.
And we've talked about this before too, Clara, is like the validity of using real examples from other reps is like you're seeing what your peers did to close that deal. It doesn't feel like you have that kind of maybe distrust that sometimes occurs. Okay,
Absolutely, yeah.
We've got a bunch coming in here. We have one from Neil Parker. Neil, did you want to expand on this one a little bit more? He mentions that sales teams kind of perceive win-loss as more of an interest to management. There's a question to this, but it's more of like an idea, and I want to hear your rebuttal or maybe some additional context to how win-loss can be important to a sales team.
Wow. Well, I'd love to hear from him if he wants to go on camera. I'm just going to put him on the spot so that he could speak a little bit more to that, but I'm happy to do a rebuttal any day. Bring it on, Adam.
Unfortunately, I don't see if he hasn't requested.
That's okay.
I love
That's
this point, but we can get into this. Yeah.
So the question is win-loss only of interest to management? So I would break it down. Win-loss, there's two different areas. There's qualitative and then there's quantitative, right? Quantitative are your win-loss rates, your actual deals, your ARR, or ACV, or revenue that you lost or won against a certain competitor. So there's the hard aspect of the data crunching in that regard. There's also the qualitative, which is the softer side, right? Which is your interviews, your anecdotes, what actually went down in the deal, the tips and tricks. And so you can do two different types of approaches with this. And when you talk about, is it of interest to management? I think they're probably very interested in the macro or the quantitative data, but your sales reps will absolutely eat up the qualitative data because they want to understand what went down in that deal. So I would love to share kind of what I do on a daily basis. I'll share a version of it. But basically, you can have internal and external interviews with your prospects and your customers, and most importantly, your account executives, so that they can share with you how they won the deal, and then you can bring that back to internal folks internally. And then lastly, you didn't hear from me, but it's a great topic for a sales kickoff as well. So I do know that sellers are very interested in this. And if you create a panel of sorts and maybe host the panel, they would absolutely eat that content up.
There's a bunch coming in. If we don't get to your questions, we will get to them at another point in time. I'll drag Claire onto our podcast to answer all of these questions that are coming in. Let's go for Ian here. Ian just dropped on in here. For rolling out content, what are some best practices on that balance between the training and rep time? On-demand training is great, but how do you make sure you're not serving up too much?
Yeah, that's where your pilot program comes in, right? Your pilot group comes in around letting you know what is too much, right? Obviously, timing, you don't want to end of the quarter, end of the year. That's the last place you want to be in terms of delivering content. I would say ask yourself the question, what is enough to be deadly? And if they can have those conversations, then you can have your objection handling guides as a support, right? As something that they can fall back on, right? And your discovery guides and, your external facing content, right? So I would think about what is the most deadly thing that they need to have those conversations and prioritize that accordingly. And then in terms of like certifications, like online, offline, I would say, an annual or biannual check-in. It doesn't have to be a full certification, is really helpful, especially just knowing the pace of industry change. So that would be my recommendation. But of course, it's going to be different for every company and every industry. And of course, you want to talk to your enablement teams about this as well.
Let's get into this. One's a nice one because it's talking about the actionable deliverables. How do you suggest incorporating a SWOT analysis into an actionable deliverable for sales? How can you present that in a way that they can use it quickly?
Very interesting, Adam.
And that was from Meredith. Sorry, I want to give people credit. These aren't my questions. I'm not nearly that smart.
Yeah. How would you incorporate a SWOT analysis into an actionable deliverable? So there is something called an actionable SWOT, which I've seen. It's a specific methodology in terms of putting information into a SWOT that actually drives action and next steps. So I would, one, think about, is your SWOT actually actionable, right? Is the data that you're putting into the SWOT task to teams, task to opportunities, and who's going to be owning your weaknesses? So if you can think through that methodology first, then it can be a little bit more actionable. And I'll have to dig through kind of my resources in order to find an actionable SWOT. But I do know that it's out there. Feel free to Google it and check it out. If not, I'm happy to follow up with you. But in terms of like where you could put that in, you could absolutely put that in battle cards. You could also put that into one pagers. You could put that into positioning guides. You could put that into objection handling kits. That's probably the biggest one that I can see it feeding into, but the world's your oyster. And anybody in chat, feel free to give some more feedback here. Absolutely.
That dovetails nicely into another question here from Namrata, who just mentioned that they're actually just in the process of creating the objection handling sections within their top competitive battle cards on their top competitors. What's the best way to start building those, in your opinion?
Adam, I couldn't hear you. I think I'm having audio difficulties.
Can you hear me now?
I can speak, but I can't hear.
Can you hear me now?
Let me see if I could change
this,
one thing real quick. Just give me a second, and then we will go right back to Q&A.
The joys.
My headphones decided not to work.
The joys of doing this live to the world.
Don't worry, I'm back.
These questions are really good, and like I mentioned, we'll be getting to them. If we can't get to them today, we're gonna be we're tracking every single question that's being asked, and we'll make sure that we get to them after the fact. I'll bug Clara to join me on our podcast and answer all of the questions you have, and I'll be sending out her answers to all of you. I really like that one around the objection handling sections on the top competitive battle cards. Not that I'm the competitive strategist here, but it does speak to the example that Clara mentioned on Alex's question, like using real examples from gong calls where you've seen your rep kill it on handling an objection, and using those real examples is obviously a tangible way to start showcasing how you can handle these objections, and then giving real life examples so that a rep can just plug and play. They see the exact language used and they go and do it themselves. Clara, let's see if I can get you back on here, because people don't want to. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry about that, everybody. Didn't mean to have a dramatic ending like that.
I like that. Keep me on my toes. So less competitive wisdom from me. Let's get it from you again. Did you hear my question around how would you start? Where would you start building your objection handling competitive battle cards, like for your top competitors? What's the starting point there?
Yeah, the starting part is putting pen to paper. And I know how corny and lame that sounds, but begin a draft and then socialize that around to your pilot group, to your sales group, to your solution engineers. I think all of that is really exciting and helpful to make sure that they have buy-in and they have co-ownership in that actual documentation. So highly would recommend that. I would also think about how you can roll this out, right? And the objection handling guide is very actionable, and you could do that in a one-to-one training, just like me and you, Adam, right? Like you give me a question, I respond back in a Zoom breakout room. We have a moderator, share best practices afterwards. You can easily do this virtually.
I have a question actually from the prior to the session too, from Alessia, which was, how can a small competitive team make the difference across a large organization? This is something I've heard from customers and different competitive pros that I've talked to. I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, first off, I want to let you know you are not alone. I have been in your shoes before. The proportion of sales reps to CI dedicated people is very sad. And hopefully we're looking to change that moving forward. But I would say start out with your key stakeholders, right? Figure out which needles do you want to move. Do you want to move the product roadmap? Do you want to move sales revenue? Do you want to move executive decision-making, right? Figure out who are your top tiers in terms of stakeholder priorities. And then you can kind of create a compete program roadmap around when to serve which group at what time and at what capacity, right? I can't tell you exactly what to do because I don't know what your focus areas are. I don't know who you report into. I don't know what team is that specifically, but I would say start by analyzing the market, start pushing out a battle card or some source of truth so people know to look to you, and then collect everything across the organization so that there's one final source of truth. So those are some tips in terms of where to start.
Let's see if we can squeeze some in here before I think our hard stops here at 10:45. So let's squeeze a couple more in. Okay, from Madher, should CI also be used to inform or tell sales what are the deals that aren't worth pursuing?
Ooh, that's a tricky one, Adam.
It's a good one. I've never seen this question before, so that's what perked my interest there.
Yeah, talk about feeding the lions and sticking your hand in the cage, right? Perfectly appropriate with our theme today. I would say talk with sales management first, right? Definitely have those conversations with the higher ups versus the actual reps, because you want to make sure that you and the sales manager are on the same side before you would take it to the reps, right? You want to make sure that you are data driven, that you show that data. Say if a lot of the deals are being lost early on in the sales process or a lot of leads are being disqualified, try to dig into your loss reasons in your CRM, dig into your DQ reasons in your CRM, and try to understand what are the data trends that you can bring to sales management so that you can be on the same page, work together to communicate that to prospects, work alongside your enablement team too. And most importantly, don't just be waving a red flag, but come with suggestions, right? Come with advice. I always say, like, the more information you have, the more you can work with, but make sure that you have a so what around it.
Let's look at this one from Aparna. This will be our last question before we have to jump here. Let me see, get a little bit of context on this one. What is the right way to understand how are others closing the deal? So I think she's asking, how do you understand how reps are actually closing the deal? I guess what competitive content they're using or the tactics they're using.
Yeah, it depends on the technology that you have set up. So that's the one caveat there. I would say how can you tell is by debriefing with your best reps after the deal closes. And that's something that can take 5 minutes, can take half an hour, can take an hour, depending on how much time they have, you have. And what you can do too is this is where your win-loss insights playbook comes from, right? Where debriefing with the reps around what went down in the deal can then power those insights and power those behavioral decision-making and recommendations. You always want to frame them as like recommendations on, you want to hear from this sales rep specifically based on their feedback. And then most importantly, give that seller who won that deal that podium, right? Instead of me trying to create a derivative summary of what won the deal, give them that podium at a sales kickoff, at a panel, at an annual training. Let them come in and support what you're doing too. I see a note from Benjamin, maybe help them qualify deals rather than tell them what not to pursue. Absolutely. A qualification guide is so critical too. Competitive discovery questions are all something that I've done and put into practice in the past. So great feedback, great engagement. And I know this is our last question. So I just want to thank everybody from the bottom of my professional heart for being here, for making this a success. And I'm so excited to get to know you personally and professionally. Please feel free to find me on LinkedIn and continue the conversation with me anytime.
Totally. Clara, this was awesome. Such great questions too. Love the engagement on the polls. This is such a great way to kick off this summit. I think we've set a pretty high bar to overcome here. I don't know, could be the best one over the 2 days.
I think so. I got to set that bar high. I'm competitive. What can I say, Adam?
I know, it's built in your DNA. Thank you everyone for attending. Next steps, go back to the main stage for our next panel coming up and the agenda. Plus you've got the meet and greet to network one-on-one, all of that good stuff. You've got Meet Klue on the left-hand side as well. Clara, thank you so much for your time. Everyone, if we didn't get to your question today, don't worry, we will be getting to them and we will be answering them. No question will be left unanswered. So thank you all. Have a great rest of the next 2 days for this summit.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy.